Hi, I'm Cathleen Armstrong, and I'm going to read to you the first chapter of my book, Always a Last Chance, which is book 5 of my series, A Place to Call Home. Last Chance is a small, fictional ranching and chili growing community in the southwestern corner of New Mexico, a place called the Boot Heel. It's a place where people love each other and exasperate each other, and where there's always another chance. So, Always a Last Chance, Chapter 1. Whoops! The door of the Dippin' Dine swung out as Jessica McLeod reached for it, and she found herself face to face with Andy Ryan and some perky little thing who had to be all of 22. Hey, how's it going? Andy's eyes widened a bit before they all but disappeared into a smile. Fine. Jess searched for something to say that didn't sound absolutely lame and came up empty. Busy as usual, but fine. Yeah, well, you look fine. Take it easy. Good seeing you. Andy didn't seem any more comfortable with the repartee than Jess did. He stepped aside so she could walk into the diner. Here for lunch? Perky laughed and grabbed Andy's arm. Well, duh, of course you are. Why else would you be here? Have you tried the green chili stew? You have to. It is just the best there is. Andy never eats anything else, do you, Andy? Guess not. The warm smile Jess remembered faded into one that looked pasted on as he put his hand on Perky's back and tried to usher her out in the door into the parking lot. I mean it, Perky called over her shoulder. And get Carlos to make you some sopapillas. They're amazing. Right, because I've never been here before. Jess took a deep breath. From childhood, people had called her outgoing, friendly, even enthusiastic. But never in her life had she been called Perky. And truthfully, people who spoke in full caps and exclamation points, who practically bounced when they walked, and who never ever stopped smiling, made her feel dull and ungainly and like she was about to trip over her own feet. Well, that was awkward. Juanita Shepherd, who had been standing at the cash register watching the whole exchange, handed her a menu. You can sit at the counter if you don't want to sit by the window. They're still out there, and you are by yourself. The window booth is just fine. Jess tried not to glance out the window as she slid into the booth, but she couldn't stop herself from taking a peek. And there they were, still standing by Andy's truck, talking to someone they ran into in the parking lot. Both men stood with their hands in their pockets, grinning like clowns, while Perky regaled them with some absolutely hysterical story. She laughed, she touched her arms, she tossed her ponytail. Jess dragged her glance away and snapped open her menu. What adult wore high ponytails anyway? I know, I don't get it either. Juanita appeared at the table with her pad and pencil. I had you two picked to go the distance the day you walked in here and sat down next to Andy at the counter. What happened? Everyone in town knows you're not exactly a football fan, but that never bothered Andy. Life happens, I guess. I'll have the chef's salad, dressing on the side, and an unsweetened iced tea. She looked up and smiled as she handed the menu back. As usual, Juanita's running commentary had the attention of the diners, and now most of them were pivoting between the conversation in the parking lot and the one at Jess's table. Salad, of course. Juanita shook her head as she wrote. She leaned down a bit and spoke in a near whisper that reverberated in the corners. You know, Bailey may be a little front and center at times, but she does try to get along. She eats what everyone else eats. She goes to football games. Of course, since she's the cheerleader coach, she has to, but still, she makes the effort to be a part of Last Chance. Just a word to the wise. Stung, Jess looked away from Juanita and out the window in time to see Andy's truck pull out onto the highway. Bailey, so Perky had a name. And of course, it had to be Bailey. Truthfully, she didn't blame Andy. She didn't even blame her colleague and mentor, Dr. Benavides, for retiring so suddenly. His wife got sick, and he wanted to spend as much time as he could with her. Totally understandable. But it left Jess working 16 hours a day, week after week. At first, Andy had seemed understanding when she had to break their dates and cancel their plans. But finally he had said, "Why don't you call me when you have some free time?" And shortly after that, Bailey moved from Colorado to teach PE at Last Chance High and coach the cheerleaders and the dance team, and that turned out to be that. Here's your salad, enjoy. Juanita set the plate in front of her. And your tea. Jess took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Never had she allowed herself to wallow in pity. And she was not about to start now. She looked up and smiled. Thanks, looks great. Compliments to Carlos. She picked up her fork and stabbed a piece of cheese and lettuce. There was absolutely nothing for her to be ashamed of. Yes, she was working hard, but that's what she had come to Last Chance to do. She was deeply proud of the classroom home health and nutrition workshops she had developed and found funding for. It was still early in the season, but she thought she could see a real difference already. And those house calls to the elderly out in the country, those took time too. But there were fewer hospital admissions last winter and fewer preventable deaths. If that cost her some trips to the picture show in San Ramon, so be it. And more of the folks in town who assured her when she first came that they were so glad that Last Chance had a doctor, but they weren't changing, were indeed changing. Marta kept the office humming, but that meant Jess met herself coming and going. She was busy. There'd be time for a social life later. Jess took another bite of her salad and tried not to notice that she was the only one in the Dip and Dine who was eating alone. How old do you think Dr. McLeod is? Bailey took a mirror from her purse and checked her teeth. I don't know. Why? Andy pulled out of the Dip and Dine parking lot onto Main Street, headed south toward the high school. She turned 28 last December 27th. We had reservations for dinner and tickets for a show in El Paso until the Reyes kid fell out of a tree and landed on his head, and Jess didn't want to be that far away while he was under observation. Well, I know you went out with her for a little bit, but she seems older than you, is she? Couldn't say, but I doubt it. She's exactly 2 years, 5 months, and 28 days younger than I am. Maybe it's her eyes. They always look tired, and she's so serious all the time. I probably shouldn't say it, but she just doesn't seem like your type at all. Andy turned the radio up. Time to end this conversation. I guess that sounds tacky, doesn't it? I didn't mean for it to. I'm sure she's really sweet. I mean, everyone likes her, right? Seemed to. Bailey finally seemed to get that he didn't want to talk. Either that or her attention had transferred to something in her bag. Andy's eyes were fixed ahead, but he could hear her rummaging around, snapping things open and closed. Finally, just as they turned into the parking lot, she gave it one last shot. Did I make you mad? She put her hand on his arm. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You know me, I just rattle on and on. It's my greatest fault. But you know I don't have that many. Andy turned the ignition off and looked over at Bailey. Her well-practiced smile was tentative and coaxing. She may have even batted her eyes once or twice. He shook his head in defeat and reached for the door handle. Accepting victory, Bailey blasted him with both dimples and hopped out of the truck on her side. Feel that cold wind? That's football weather. And we're going to win again this Saturday. I know it. You did it, Andy. Only your second year here, and we're headed into the playoffs. Go Pumas all the way to state. We're not there yet. Andy pulled his hat low to keep it from blowing off. And I need to get some stuff done. See you later. Oh, wait. The girls have been working on some great posters and an amazing banner for the team to break through when they take the field Saturday. Don't you want to come see? Surprise me. He grinned and lifted his hand in a wave as he headed into the field house. Life sure wasn't dull with Bailey around. But when she was wound up, which seemed to be most of the time, she could be exhausting. Last Chance High showed her influence everywhere you looked as well. New posters and banners lined the halls of the school and the fences of the field every week. She had the cheerleaders leading impromptu pep rallies in the quad during lunch, and she had even approached him with the idea of each cheerleader adopting a player to care for, bringing him little gifts and treats on game day. Andy had nixed that one. It just didn't sit well with him. And besides, what team needs that kind of distraction, especially on game day? Bailey had seemed only mildly disappointed before she was on to some other scheme. But that was Bailey. Funny running into Jess, though. He hadn't seen her all summer, and that in itself was odd in a town as small as Last Chance. He had thought he'd run into her when he was out for his run, but She must be operating on a different schedule these days, if she had time to run at all. Andy plopped into his desk and opened his laptop. He'd never admitted to Bailey, but Jess did look tired. Even when she was smiling, her eyes looked sad. "Hey, Coach." Kev Gallegos, his assistant, swiveled his chair to face Andy's desk. "I've been going over these scouting reports from San Jacinto, and I'm pretty pumped up. We're 8-1 and they're 7-2, so it looks close. Good news, we're one of the two that beat them during the season. Bad news, they beat San Ramon 38-6. And of course, our one loss was to San Ramon. Man, that one hurt. We only lose one game the entire season, and it has to be to San Ramon. For some folks, that's the only game worth counting anyway. San Ramon's not going to the playoffs. We are. That ought to cheer him up." Andy didn't take his eyes off his computer screen. Right. If Kev noticed that he didn't seem to have Andy's full attention, he gave no sign. "Another thing I've had my eye on is San Jacinto's running back. He's good, really good. We were able to keep him controlled when we played them, but that was early in the season. He's just gotten better and better as the season's gone on." Andy was dimly aware that Kev's voice continued to talk about Saturday's game, and on some level he knew that it demanded his full attention. The team had worked too hard to give it up in their first playoff game. But opening that door at the Dip and Dine and coming face to face with Jess had shaken him up more than he would have thought possible. After all, she was the one who more or less ended things, and he had no choice but to move on. Bailey turned up out of nowhere. She loved football, and face it, she was not at all hard to look at. And if she always seemed to be on stage looking for a spotlight, well, maybe that's just what a would-be hermit like himself needed. He took the memory of Jess and her red hair and her blue eyes and her startled smile and tucked them away in the back of his mind before turning back to Kev. "Sorry, I didn't get all of that. What were you saying?" "Okay. I know you don't like anyone to talk about it, but this team is something special. I think maybe we have another shot at the glory days, not like you guys had. No one's ever going to match that, but our own version. You know, something we can tell our own kids about." Jess let the back door of her office slam behind her, snatched her lab coat off its hanger, and jammed her arms into the sleeves. For the 50th time, she promised herself she would never go back to the Dip and Dine. The constant critiquing of menu choices and unwanted advice was one thing, but in making Jess's love life, or lack thereof, a topic of interest and discussion in the crowded diner, Juanita had just gone too far. "Accept Juanita as she is, or leave her alone," everyone said. "She's not going to change." The assumption seemed to be that Jess would wind up accepting Juanita as she was, like everyone else in town seemed to. But there was the other option. Leave her alone. And that's exactly what Jess planned to do, even if it meant giving Last Chance only restaurant and chief gathering place a pass forever. Her phone vibrated in her hand as she transferred it from her purse to her pocket. She glanced at the screen. "Hi, Mom." "Jess?" There was a pause. "I thought for sure I'd get voicemail. I was going to leave a message." "Nope, just got back from lunch. What's up?" "Oh, I couldn't wait to tell you that we rented a place for Thanksgiving at Tahoe. Of course we want you to be there. Catherine is bringing her fiance. The slopes will be open. We'll roast a great big turkey. Doesn't that all sound perfect?" She paused for a few silent seconds before she pushed on. "We haven't all been together since you left. Can't you come for a few days? You could even bring that football coach if you want to. Andy, isn't it? We found a big place and there'll be lots of room. Would love to meet him." This time the silence just hung there waiting, and Jessica finally sighed. "Mom, I don't know how I can get away. I'm up to my eyebrows here. You know that Dr. Benavides retired, and I'm totally swamped. I can't even begin to see a break out there." "Jessica, listen to me." Mom had her mom voice going. "You don't need to explain to me how much time and effort it takes to get a practice started, and how relentless the responsibilities can be. I've lived it, and so did your dad. But if we had gone after our careers like you are, we would never even seen each other. My goodness, you and Catherine probably wouldn't even be here." "Mom?" Darling, all I'm saying is if you try to run a marathon like a 40-yard dash, you're not going to make it. No one can. I know what I'm doing. I'm not planning to keep this pace forever. You know, it's just that right now there's so much to do. Things will settle out soon. How about if I promise you right now to try my very best to try to make it home for Thanksgiving next year? The silence on the other end of the line went on so long that Jess thought the call had been dropped. Mom, you still there? I'm still here. More silence followed. Mom, please try to understand. Jess swallowed the lump that tried to clog her voice. She was an adult and did not require pity. I'd like nothing more than to come for Thanksgiving, but I just can't this year. Maybe next. All right then. Mom did not sound at all happy. Maybe next year. We'll be thinking about you and missing you this year, though, and we'll have a room all ready for you if you find you can get away. I'll keep that in mind. The lump in her throat grew too big to swallow, and Jess's voice was a little higher and shakier than she wanted it to be, but she did her best to sound cheerful as she signed off. Give my love to everyone, and be sure to send lots of pictures. Bye now. Jess noted the time as she put the phone down and grabbed for a tissue. She had 20 minutes before the first patient of the afternoon. That allowed 5 minutes for a few self-indulgent tears, 5 minutes to mop up, and 10 more to get into the proper frame of mind for her afternoon. Perfect. A few minutes later, and well into her third tissue, a tap on the door interrupted Jess's well-regulated pity party, and Marta opened the door and stuck her head in. Jess, I thought I heard you come in. Yep, just got here. Jess blinked back tears, trying to look as if she hadn't just been sobbing, and shuffled a few papers around on her desk. Marta was not fooled. She stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. What's the matter, Chica? Is everything all right with your family? With 4 kids still at home and only the oldest off at college, Marta fell into mom mode at the drop of a hat. Yeah, everything's fine. I'm just having a moment. Jess sniffed and swiped at her nose with a sodden tissue. What's up? Marta gave her a long, worried look before she continued. Well, I stopped by the gas station on my way back from lunch, and there were these kids there paying Manny in change for a couple gallons of gas. Oh, Jess, you should have seen the way the boy looked at what was left in his wallet, like he was just begging it to last a while longer. Of course, I filled his tank for him, but I just couldn't go off and leave them. So, Jess had a feeling she knew where this was leading. So, I brought them here. Marta folded her arms and met Jess's watery gaze. As it happens, your 1 o'clock canceled just after you left. Evelyn's sister-in-law came in town unexpectedly, and they decided to go to San Ramon for lunch. Oh, Jess, they're just babies. They can't be any older than Gabe. Jess sighed and sat back. No point in being exasperated. Not with Evelyn Watson for canceling an appointment at the last minute for a lunch date, or with Marta for, well, being Marta. This was just life and last chance. Okay, but why did you bring them here? Do they have a medical problem? Marta held up one finger and moved to open the door again. Just wait, I'll call them. Jess opened her desk drawer and took a peek into the mirror she kept there. She was a blotchy mess, no hiding it. Just another blessing of having red hair. When she looked up, Marcia was ushering the young couple into her office. They were a couple of babies, all right, and unless Jess was mistaken, baby number 3 would be joining the family by Christmas. So that's chapter 1 of Always the Last Chance. I hope you enjoyed it.